Hello, and welcome back to Vita Activa. Without warning, early in my experience as a therapist, I realized one elephant in many of my therapeutic rooms was perfectionism. Perfectionism is an elephant that engenders more rigid, frozen fear than fluid forward movement. As I understand perfectionism, it is almost always compensatory. That is, it begins as a cover up for what is perceived to be a shameful deficit or failure. A frequently seen example concerns growing up with an ACE, or adverse childhood experience. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention list the following adversities that to qualify as ACEs must have been experienced prior to reaching 18 years of age. The first is experiencing violence, abuse, or neglect. Second, witnessing violence in the home or community. Third, having a family member attempt or die by suicide, or growing up in a household with 4, substance use problems, 5, mental health problems, 6, instability due to parental separation, or 8, instability due to household members being in jail or prison. As always, and I shun absolutes, there are two big picture responses to a situation. As Epictetus put it, you can grasp the right or the wrong handle. As the wokists would have it, you are a victim or an oppressor. As Carol Dweck put it, you can adopt a fixed or a growth mindset. I am all in with Dweck, Epictetus, and others of goodwill who believe that people change with their experiences, some without reflection, some with full intention. This is a choice, in fact, the most fundamental of choices, to be fully awake or to be on cruise control. I emphasize this choice making because I do not want a person taking this list of ACEs to believe that they are doomed. Far from it. You are experienced and probably wiser than those who have had no such experiences. I experienced 4 of these prior to 18, 5 by 20, but who's counting? The APA, that is the American Psychological Association, defines perfectionism as the tendency to demand of others or of oneself an extremely high or even flawless level of performance in excess of what is required by the situation. It, that being perfectionism, is associated with depression, anxiety, eating disorders, and other mental health problems. Within that definition, there are 4 points worthy of analysis. I'm going to analyze them out of order. Firstly, those feeling badly about themselves, who feel they can only compensate for their perceived inadequacy through perfect performances, apply this destructive standard not only to themselves, but they foist it upon others. This is the gift that just keeps on taking. It robs people of initiative. I'll just fail anyway. Well-spiritedness. I'll just look stupid when I fail. And an entrepreneurial zest. I'm not risking that. I'll look like an idiot. Notice the phrase perfect performances. There are 2 sins in that confidence eating little phrase. First, perfect performances in music, drama, athletics, or taking the garbage cans to the curb are rarer than hen's teeth. Don't ask. Perfect should be reserved for things like reaching the moon, a rocket returning to Earth with pinpoint accuracy, i.e., part of the toxicity of that word is that we take the utterly exceptional and apply it to scrubbing the dog droppings off of your walking boots. Now, the latter does deserve close visual and olfactory attention, but excellence, come on, you're not going to send those boots out for laboratory standard disinfection, are you? No, because a utility sink, a bit of soap, and a rinsable brush will do the trick nicely. Where this stops being funny is when we get to the 4th point. Perfectionism, as I see it, can become quite obsessive, i.e., I must get this absolutely right. The APA tells us that perfectionism is associated with eating disorders that kill one person every hour in the USA. That comes from the Bulimia Project of this year, accounting for over 10,000 lost souls per year for our southern neighbor alone. The APA also informs us that perfectionism is associated with depression and anxiety. These two are related, with anxiety often leading to depression. Anecdotally, i.e., speaking without counting, I administer a depression test to most of my clients on each visit until they consistently score 2 or less. The last question on the PHQ-9, the test I'm speaking of, concerns suicidal ideation and or self-harms. The higher a client's perfectionism, the higher the likelihood of one or both of those appearing. To put it plainly, perfectionism kills, while good enough fosters well-spiritedness. The second point from the definition above, worthy of discussion, yes, we are doing them out of order, good enough, is the what of perfectionism, which tells us that adherence to this standard requires, or rather demands, extremely high or even flawless levels of performance. Imagine what you do to a child by insisting that good enough is not good enough. From the get-go, that kid is anxious because he becomes too self-conscious about how he appears. With that self-consciousness comes a lack of easygoing spontaneity because he's always on the prowl for a hazardous situation in which he fears he will be unable to deliver yet another extremely high or flawless performance. I worry that there may be readers who say, yes, Dan, but you admit you love excellence, so doesn't your elitism foster perfectionism? If you'll excuse a bit of self congratulation, that's an excellent question. No, it doesn't. And here's the difference. Elitism is nothing more or less than the recognition that in any field of endeavor, there will be those who excel and those who don't. Elitists would strongly prefer to be treated by a doctor who has a consistent record of excellent results, rather than one who was admitted to medical school because she met performance-free standards of admission. If you're into stats, you can rank all performances with respect to their distance from excellence. Here's the point. People are blessedly individual. It's a huge part of what makes life such an invigorating blast of joy. Asking your aspiring classical guitarist to leave his sore piece alone in favor of a perfect showing as a grade 8 high jumper is madness. Unless your child is multiply talented, it happens, you are better to observe the British aphorism, horses for courses. That means we ain't all high jumpers, classical guitarists, or carpenters. And while that's a beautiful thing, it is an ugly thing to demand of yourself, your children, or your friends that they must do better than good enough, everywhere, every time. Such perfectionistic thinking is, as I have tried to demonstrate, in flagrant disregard of the reality that people are entirely individual. Save your best for what you value the most and let it be good enough. Significantly, the third point from the definition also supports our horses for courses standard. The APA maintains, like Aristotle, if he's not mentioned once per page, I've failed, that performance standards are best evaluated based on individual situations, i.e., perfectionism is an excess of what is required by the situation. There are two further points, both from my beloved Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. The first is that there are, broadly, two types of excellence, intellectual and ethical. Intellectual excellence comes of experience and time, while ethical excellence comes of practice, or in Aristotle's word, habit. What is of interest is that at this point in his writing, Aristotle noted that habit, or more, can be substituted for the word moral, the synonym of ethical. That is, ethical excellence is morality, practiced and reflected upon. Where this leaves us in terms of perfectionism is also addressed. Aristotle stated that excellence we get by first exercising excellences, rather, we get by first exercising them, as also happens in the case of the arts. For the things we have to learn before we can do, we learn by doing. E.g., we become non perfectionists by consistently practicing the acceptance of good enough. On closing, we will look at which factors from our 5 input lists this discussion implicates. The first comes from the 10 Commandments in the Bible. Honor thy father and thy mother, as the Lord thy God hath commanded thee, that thy days may be prolonged, and that it may go well with thee in the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. And as anyone who's listened to this for any length of time will know, I am not a Christian. The Bible is a very interesting and powerful document, but it is not something that I necessarily try to live by. But I think this is important. What I believe this is saying is that by honoring thy father and thy mother, as the Bible has asked, you are actually honoring that which we inherit. And that which we inherit is the cultural history for us, is the cultural history of the West. If we inherit that, we accept that. And to accept that is to accept something that has something that has been compiled and put together, something that's always in flux, that includes and necessarily includes errors and anomalies. I will give you 2 examples that come to mind. Wuthering Heights and Don Quixote are both included in the Western canon as great works of literature. Part of their greatness is their oddness. They are exceptional. By the standards that were prevalent in their times, they were not normal. They were not perfect. They were anomalous. I think that's what that message is telling me. The second of the 5 lists we take from is from Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics, his list. Virtue ethics is a situation specific. That is, there is an optimum good in every situation, but that optimum good is not necessarily transferable to apparently parallel situations, i.e., particulars matter. What I hear this saying is that the specifics, the context of every situation, and the attributes of the individual in that situation have to be looked at in order to evaluate its value. To insist that someone bring perfectionism or flawless performance to everything is to basically say, well, they're not going to go there because it's going to be so terrifying that they won't even try it. What Aristotle is saying is try it. If you fail, keep working. That's the way we build excellence. Uh, Third one comes from Stephen Covey. Begin with the end in mind. Define clear measures of success and a plan to achieve them. That goes to where I just ended with Aristotle. A clear measure of success for someone who's trying something is probably a failed or barely passable by typical standards performance. And that's great. That's what you do. You start out, you fail, you improve slowly, you keep trying. But if you don't set the standards and accept perfectionism, you're not going to go in there. And if you do go in there, you're going to end up depressed and highly discouraged. Jordan Peterson, in his book, the first one, The 12 Rules, I think it's the 12 Rules of Success or something, set your house in perfect order before you criticize the world. And that's a clever phrasing because if your house is in perfect order, I feel badly for you because I cannot imagine how much time, effort that would take and that you're spending that time and effort on something that's so impermanent because time, dust, air, light all change these things all the time. Nobody has their house in perfect order. And what he is asking us to do in that is to accept that reality. Same one I'm saying. Do not adopt perfectionism as a standard. Finally, the last issue comes from the list, the 5 attributes of positive psychology, which says engagement E. True engagement fosters flow and full presence. Flow was brought to us by a man, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi, and if you just look up flow, you'll find him. Um, and it's a full engagement to the point of forgetting time and forgetting other things because you're so taken with what you're doing that you're fully absorbed in the activity. Now, if you think about that, and if you think about putting perfectionism into that mix, where is the flow? Where is the joy? Where is the spontaneity? It's gone because you're measuring yourself against an impossible standard. That's all I got. That's what I wanted to say about perfectionism. I hope it's helpful. Thank you for thinking and acting. More next week. Be well.